You know, when you look across the modern cinematic landscape, especially in horror, there's one franchise that hasn't just been successful.
Yeah.
It's completely dominated.
Oh, absolutely. We're not talking about like an old slasher series trying to find its footing again.
No, not at all. This is something else entirely. We are talking about the Conjuring Universe.
It is, and I don't think this is an exaggeration. It's an unprecedented commercial achievement in horror. I mean, think about it. In just over a decade, since 2013, it's blown past every single competitor.
To become the highest-grossing horror franchise of all time.
Of all time. And the numbers are just, they're wild. We're talking about a global box office that's currently sitting at over $2.7 billion.
That number by itself is just staggering, but the economics behind it, that's where it becomes a total anomaly. That $2.7 billion was made on a combined budget of only, what, around $263 million for everything?
Yeah, for all the core films and the spin-offs, that return on investment, the ROI, it's unlike almost anything else in Hollywood right now. Maybe some Blumhouse films, sure, but The Conjuring is doing it on this massive interconnected scale.
Exactly. It's a machine. And what makes it so perfect for a deep dive like this is that this entire cinematic empire is built on the lives and the case files of two very real and very controversial people.
Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Right. So our mission today is to peel back the layers on that $2.7 billion operation. We're going to look at the architecture, how James Wan and the producers turned a pair of paranormal investigators into these almost superhero-like figures.
And then I think more importantly, we have to get into the messy, controversial reality of the actual cases they dramatized.
And we're doing this at a really pivotal moment for the franchise. The main story seems to be reaching what the creators are calling a natural end.
Mm-hmm. The next film, The Conjuring, Last Rites, is based on the 1986 Smurl family haunting. And it's a big one because it's being positioned as the potential end of an era, or what they're calling Phase 1, for the main Warren characters.
For Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga's characters, yeah. The story that acts as the hub for this whole universe is maybe, just maybe, drawing to a close.
Yeah.
So let's go right back to the beginning. Let's look at how they built this house of horrors. What I find so fascinating about the genesis of The Conjuring is that the idea, the spark that launched this whole thing, it started almost 20 years before the first movie ever hit theaters.
Yeah, that's a piece of the history that gets glossed over a lot. This wasn't some quick studio pitch. This was a long, long process.
So where does it actually begin?
You have to go all the way back to 1999 to a producer named Tony DeRosa-Grund. He went to meet the Warrens to hear their original interview tapes about the Perron family haunting.
In case it becomes the first movie.
Exactly. And the story goes he was so captivated that he recorded Lorraine Warren playing back that original tape and their whole conversation about it.
So what was on that tape that made him think, this is it, this is a movie?
Well, according to the reports, the real kicker came from Ed Warren himself. At the very end of the recording, Ed apparently turned to DeRosa-Grund and said something like, "If we can't make this into a film, I don't know what we can."
Wow. So that was the moment.
That was the moment. The IP, the whole concept of turning these case files into a movie really became a solid thing.
But, just having an idea isn't enough. DeRosa-Grund then spent, nearly 14 years trying to get it made.
14 years of development hell. He bounced the project around everywhere. Gold Circle Films, Summit Entertainment. A bunch of studios passed on it before it finally landed at New Line Cinema.
And the breakthrough wasn't just getting the studio on board, right?
Yeah.
There was a huge shift in the story itself.
A radical shift. And this came from the screenwriters, Chad and Carrie Hayes. See, in almost every haunted house, movie think Poltergeist, or the Amityville Horror, the story always focuses on the family, on the victims.
Well, of course.
The Hayes brothers took all that original material, the tapes, and DeRosa-Grund's treatment, and they completely reoriented the point of view.
They shifted it away from the Perron family and onto the investigators, onto Ed and Lorraine Warren.
And that, right there, is the genius of the entire franchise. It's the architectural masterstroke. Because suddenly, the Warrens become recurring protagonists. They become the heroes in a way horror just hadn't really seen before.
You're right. Horror usually relies on the final girl or a cat that gets killed off one by one.
Exactly. By making the Warrens this stable, emotionally grounded couple that you follow from case to case, they instantly created the foundation for a shared cinematic universe. It's the same principle the MCU uses with its heroes.
Let's unpack that because that's key to the $2.7 billion. It elevates the stakes beyond just, are they going to get out of the house? We're invested in the Warrens' relationship, their sacrifices, their survival across multiple films.
Yeah, it creates this incredible continuity. You're not just watching another ghost story, you're watching the next chapter in the Warrens' ongoing battle.
And to pull that off, you need a visionary. Which brings us to James Wan.
The singular creator of the universe, really. I mean, he'd already proven he understood high-return horror. He co-created Saw and Insidious. The guy knows how to make a profitable, scary movie.
Saw made over $100 million on a tiny budget. He was the perfect person for this. But what drew him to the Warren story specifically?
He said himself he didn't want to just make another ghost story. He was really drawn to the idea of basing a film on real people, on real-life characters. That search for some kind of authenticity, however you want to define it, was his entry point.
And his specific directing style is directly responsible for how profitable these movies are. People talk about the James Wan effect. What does that actually mean?
Well, it's a few things. Yes, he uses practical effects, which helps. But more than that, he uses localized settings, usually just one house, which keeps costs way down.
Right.
But the real key is his use of psychological tension. He masters silence, he uses scares in your peripheral vision, and these long, slow tracking shots that just build an insane amount of dread. He doesn't need giant, expensive CGI monsters.
So every dollar he spends on sound design or a camera move is working 3 times as hard as a dollar spent on, say, a digital demon in another blockbuster.
Yeah.
Just smart, economical filmmaking.
Absolutely. And you see that thinking in the whole franchise model. One strategy was to keep the main Conjuring films, the numbered ones, as accurate as possible to the Warrens' accounts.
Okay.
But the spin-offs, Annabelle, The Nun, all of those, that's where the creative team could really cut loose and, as he put it, explore different subgenres in the horror genre.
So they could do a gothic horror with The Nun or a creepy doll story with Annabelle, all while keeping it tied to the main series. It's brilliant.
And the glue holding it all together is the cinematic Warrens. I mean, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, they are the brand at this point.
Totally.
One has said they both have this deep ownership of the characters. They've lived with these roles for nearly a decade. The whole emotional core of this billion-dollar franchise rests on the audience's connection to that loving but constantly tormented couple.
Which is why the creators want to give them a proper send-off with last rites. But the second you build your empire on real cases, you are actively inviting controversy. Because Hollywood will always pick drama over a documentary.
And that tension is the engine that drives this whole thing.
Okay, so let's dive into that source material, starting with the one that kicked it all off. The Perron family haunting from the first Conjuring movie.
Right, this is the case DeRosa Gren heard on that tape back in '99. The real story involves the Perron family, Roger, Carolyn, and their 5 daughters, who moved into this old farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island in 1971.
And the activity they reported started off kinda standard haunted house stuff, right? Smells, footsteps.
Yeah, cold spots, that sort of thing. But it escalated. The most famous claims involve Carolyn Pern being physically attacked, and the family eventually identifying the main ghost as Bathsheba Sherman.
Who, according to the lore, was a Satan-worshipping witch from the 18th century who cursed the land.
And the film's opening is basically a highlight reel of all their claims. The clock stopping at 3:07 a.m., Carolyn getting these mysterious bruises, the family dog, Sadie, being found dead outside.
And Lorraine Warren was a consultant on the film, wasn't she?
She was. And she maintained publicly that most of what was shown in the movie was real.
But this is where the movie's drama spills over and creates a real-world mess. The film basically put a giant red arrow on a map pointing to a private home.
And that led to a lawsuit. In 2015, the people who owned the house at the time, Norma Sutcliffe and Gerald Helfrich, sued Warner Bros. And James Wan.
They'd bought the house in 1987, decades before the movie was even a thought. So what was their argument? What were they suing for?
It wasn't about, the house's reputation. It was about tangible physical harassment. They claimed that after the movie came out, they had to deal with constant trespassing, vandalism.
Oh, wow.
And worst of all, they started finding objects on their property associated with satanic cults.
So the movie essentially turned their private home into a tourist attraction for ghost hunters and apparently cultists.
Exactly. Their argument was that they had lived there peacefully for over 20 years, and the only thing haunting them now was the endless stream of trespassers caused by the film. It's a perfect example of how Hollywood's profit machine can just bulldoze into real people's lives.
It's a heavy start. Okay, let's move to The Conjuring 2, which tackled 2 huge cases, Amityville and the Enfield poltergeist.
Right. So the film opens with the Warrens at the Amityville house in 1976 investigating the DeFeo murders. But that sequence was really there to serve the bigger cinematic story.
How so?
It's where Lorraine has her first vision of the demonic nun, Valak, and a premonition of Ed's death. One was clear that it wasn't about Valak being at Amityville. It was a psychic glimpse of the demon that would come after them later in the film.
So it sets up the personal stakes. But the main event of that movie is the Enfield poltergeist case from 1977, the Hodgson family in London.
A very famous case. It all started after two sisters, Janet and Margaret, played with a Ouija board. Soon after, their mother, Peggy, claimed a heavy chest of drawers slid across the room on its own.
But the thing that really caught the public's attention was the voice.
Oh, yeah. The entity supposedly spoke through 11-year-old Janet in this deep, guttural voice, claiming to be a man named Bill Wilkins who had died in the house.
The case was investigated by a lot of British researchers, but the movie really puts the Warrens front and center, and that's where the controversy gets really sharp.
It does. The film portrays the Warrens as the primary heroic investigators who solve the case. But critics, and even one of the original investigators, Guy Lyon Playfair, said the movie hugely exaggerates their role.
What did he say?
Playfair publicly stated that the Warrens showed up uninvited, were mostly interested in promoting themselves, and only stayed at the house for a single day.
One day. That's completely different from the movie.
It completely undercuts the entire narrative of the film. But, once you've established the Warrens as the heroes of your billion-dollar franchise, you can't just have them pop in for a cameo. The story demanded they be the heroes, regardless of the real-life record.
And the evidence from the case itself was pretty shaky, too.
Very shaky. Skeptics pointed out that the kids were caught bending spoons and throwing things when they thought no one was looking.
And didn't Janet herself admit to faking some of it?
She did. In a TV interview in 1980, she admitted that she and her sister faked things once or twice just to see if the investigators would catch them. She later walked that back a bit, saying only about 2% of it was faked, but the damage was done. It cast a lot of doubt.
Plus, her own take on the ghost was way less scary than the movie's version.
Right. Janet said later that she never felt the poltergeist was truly evil. She thought it just wanted to be at rest. The film, of course, went for maximum drama and gave us the demon Valak instead.
It's a clear choice of fiction over fact. Which brings us to the next film, the supposed finale of this phase, Last Rites and the Smurl haunting.
And this case is significantly darker. We're talking about the 1986 Smurl family case in Pennsylvania. Jack and Janet Smurl claimed they were under constant, violent, demonic attack.
And this wasn't just things moving around. This was physical, right?
Extremely physical. The claims included physical battery and, most disturbingly, alleged sexual assault against Jack Smurl by a succubus-like entity. It's incredibly dark stuff, which is probably why the filmmakers saw it as fitting for a final chapter.
And the Warrens were deeply involved in this one. What were their findings?
They concluded there were 4 separate demons in the house, led by one main demon whose goal was to completely destroy the family.
And Ed Warren claimed he saw things himself.
He did. He said he encountered the presence on his first night there and witnessed furniture flying around the room when he used holy water and a crucifix. I mean, it's classic high drama material.
So you have this year-long, incredibly violent haunting that needs the world's most famous demonologists. But the big question, the real skeptical counterpoint, comes right after they leave.
That's it. The Smurls sold the house in 1987. The new tenant, a woman named Deborah Owens, moved in and told the local paper she never experienced a single supernatural thing. Nothing.
That is a huge contradiction. How does a house infested with 4 violent demons bent on destruction just go quiet the minute a new person moves in?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's that constant contradiction, that persistence of doubt that honestly keeps this franchise so compelling. You're always left wrestling with what to believe.
Okay, so let's shift from the individual cases and look at the architectural genius of how they wove all these separate controversial stories into one massive working universe. It's like the MCU, but for ghosts.
It's a classic hub-and-spoke model. The Warrens are the hub. They're the reliable, emotionally stable center that connects everything back to acclaimed reality.
And the spokes are all the spin-off franchises. The backstories of the demons and possessed objects that the Warrens collect and, crucially, contain in their occult museum.
It's basically an IP generator based on their collection. You have the main Conjuring films, you have the 3 Annabelle films, the 2 Nun films. It's this whole ecosystem. The spin-offs let them play in different horror sandboxes while still being tied to that central hub.
Let's start with the face of the franchise. Its mascot, really, Annabelle.
Yeah.
She's basically replaced Chucky as the killer doll for a new generation.
But the doll we see on screen is a complete invention. During pre-production on the first Conjuring, James Wan realized they couldn't get the rights to use the image of the real Annabelle doll.
Why not? What was the issue?
Because the real one is, well, not very scary. It's a Raggedy Ann doll, a soft cloth toy for a child. Wan knew that to get the visual terror he needed for a movie, he had to design his own creepy porcelain monster.
The cinematic Annabelle, as one of the directors said, became the Mickey Mouse of The Conjuring.
Absolutely. And they changed the backstory, too. In the first film's prologue, the Warrens explained that the doll was never possessed by the spirit of a little girl, which is what the original owners thought.
Right. They say it's something else.
The Warrens insisted it was a manipulative, demonic entity. The demon wasn't trying to play. It was using the doll as a bridge to eventually possess a human being. That single change makes the doll so much more menacing.
And the idea of containing that doll is so central to the Warrens' whole story. Their occult museum wasn't just a collection. They saw it as a spiritual vault.
Yes, a place to contain these dangerous items and stop them from hurting anyone else. The real Annabelle doll is still there, run by their son-in-law, Tony Spera, in a specially blessed glass case. The Warrens were very clear. The demon is still attached to it.
And you have those famous stories about people who visited the museum, right?
Oh, yeah. The most well-known one is about a guy who mocked the doll, tapped on the glass case, and was killed in a motorcycle accident on his way home that same day.
So they were deadly serious about these objects not being props.
They believed they were genuine spiritual threats, and that seriousness is what gives the spin-offs their weight. You see that idea play out perfectly in Annabelle Comes Home.
Which James Wan called A Night at the Museum with Haunted Objects.
Exactly. Annabelle, even while she's in her case, acts as a beacon that activates all the other haunted items in the Warrens' collection. Things like the bride entity or the Black Shock, which is this kind of hellhound figure.
It just shows that the whole collection is a treasure trove of potential sequels. But no spin-off has been more successful than the one built around Valak, the demonic nun.
And Valak was a brilliant but very last-minute addition to The Conjuring 2.
Really? She wasn't the original villain?
Not at all. The original antagonist was supposed to be a more generic, demonic figure with wings. But during reshoots, Wan felt it wasn't grounded enough. He came up with the idea of the nun.
Which is so much more effective, because it's a direct attack on the Warrens' faith.
It's the ultimate blasphemy, to take a symbol of purity and faith and turn it into the face of evil to terrorize two devout Catholic investigators. It's genius.
And the prequels, The Nun and the Nun II, gave this demon a whole medieval backstory.
They did. The lore they created is that Valak was an angel cast out of heaven, summoned in the 15th century by an occultist duke in a Romanian monastery.
St. Carthas, which they filmed at the real Corvin Castle. It looks incredible.
It does. And the mythology says that Christian knights managed to seal Valak away using a vial of the blood of Christ. But that seal was broken centuries later during bombings in World War II, which freed the entity.
And The Nun was a monster hit. It made over $365 million, making it the highest-grossing film in the entire franchise. The spin-off out-earned the main movies.
Which is incredible. And that demon is what ties the whole first phase of this universe together in a perfect bow.
Okay, talk about that connection, because it's a really clever bit of writing.
So, at the very end of the first Nun movie, we see that the character Frenchie, who helped fight Valak, has actually been possessed by the demon. We see an inverted cross appear on his neck.
Right.
The film then flashes forward 20 years, and we see footage of Ed and Lorraine Warren at a university seminar showing a film of an exorcism. And it's Frenchie, or Maurice, as they call him. And that seminar is the scene that happens right before they get the call to go investigate the Perron family in the first Conjuring movie.
Wow, so it's a perfect narrative loop. The end of The Nun is the direct prequel to the beginning of the entire series. It makes the whole thing feel meticulously planned from the start.
And that meticulously planned structure is what's behind those huge financial numbers we talked about. Over $2.7 billion globally. To do that in 12 years with horror movies that cost, 20 to 40 million to make, it's just mind-boggling.
It really is. It's that James Wan effect combined with the hub and spoke model. Each movie works on its own, so you don't have to have seen Annabelle to get The Conjuring 2.
Yeah, it lowers the barrier to entry for new viewers. And it creates this marketing synergy. A hit spinoff drives people back to the main series and vice versa. It's a beautifully designed fear engine.
But before we look at what's next, we have to talk about the one film that kind of sits outside this perfect canon. The odd one out. The Curse of La Llorona.
Yes. The canonical schism. This is a fascinating story. The film came out in 2019, and it has a direct, explicit link to the universe. The priest from the first Annabelle movie, Father Perez, is in it.
And he even talks about his experience with Annabelle, right? The doll even shows up in a flashback.
Exactly. The connections are undeniable. But then, almost immediately after it was released, the director and producer came out and said it was not an official part of the universe. They decanonized it.
Why? Why would they do that?
The official story is that the connections were just meant as a little wink and a nod, but it got mistakenly announced as a core chapter. But the speed with which they walked it back suggests they were terrified of diluting the brand.
So they didn't want just any supernatural film to be able to claim it's part of the Conjuring universe.
Yeah.
They're protecting the IP.
Very, very protective of it. But you can't talk about a franchise based on real cases without talking about the huge legal fights over who actually owns those stories.
Right. And the big one was the lawsuit from Gerald Brittle.
A massive $900 million lawsuit. Brittle wrote a book about the Warrens in 1980 called The Demonologist, and he claimed that his contract gave him the exclusive rights to all of their base files.
$900 million. That's not a nuisance lawsuit. That's a franchise killer. What was the basis of his claim?
He argued his contract didn't just cover his book, but gave him exclusive film rights to the Warrens' personal records, their files, their stories, everything. He claimed the movies were infringing on material he legally controlled.
And what happened with that?
Well, Warner Bros. Eventually settled out of court, but the really wild part is what came out during the legal battle.
Which was?
Documents suggested that Tony DeRosa-Grund, the original producer who spent 14 years getting the first movie made, was the alleged mastermind behind Brittle's lawsuit.
Wait, the guy who started it all was trying to tear it down?
That was the allegation. The reports suggested DeRosa-Grund felt he'd been marginalized and was owed millions, so he was trying to use Brittle's claim as leverage against the studio, allegedly setting up side deals to control the litigation.
That's unbelievable. The entire $2.7 billion franchise was built on spiritual intellectual property, and it was almost taken down by a legal fight over who owned the rights to the ghost stories.
A $900 million threat is definitely scarier than any CGI demon. Hashtag outro.
So when you put it all together, we've really been exploring two parallel realities here. On one hand, you have this incredibly successful, masterfully interconnected cinematic universe built by James Wan.
And on the other, you have the deeply controversial, highly debated real-life investigations of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The entire financial success of the franchise lives in the tension between those two narratives.
We've seen how they took these figures, who were often viewed with skepticism, and turned them into these beloved, heroic protagonists.
And we've seen the huge creative leaps they took, turning a simple Raggedy Ann doll into the monster Annabelle, or wildly exaggerating the Warrens' role in a case like Enfield just to keep them at the center of the story.
And now, with The Conjuring. Last rites on the horizon, that first incredibly profitable phase, the core story of Ed and Lorraine, is apparently coming to an end.
But the House of Horrors is definitely not closing. The universe isn't ending. The creative teams, Atomic Monster and New Line, are already moving into phase 2. We're getting more sequels like The Nun II, and they're openly talking about spin-offs based on other artifacts from the museum.
Right, things like The Bride or the Haunted Samurai Armor. That spiritual vault is still full of potential movies.
The factory is running at full steam. It's just shifting from the Warren stories to the stories of their collected enemies.
So here's a final provocative thought to leave you with. The real Ed and Lorraine Warren collected all those dangerous artifacts. Annabelle? The music box, not as museum pieces, but for containment.
In a spiritually fortified vault, yeah.
They were adamant that mocking these items could bring real physical harm. They cited car crashes, illnesses, real-world consequences for people who didn't take them seriously. So, given how this cinematic universe has so strategically blurred the line between movie horror and their claimed reality, what does it mean for us, the audience, when we embrace these stories as fun popcorn entertainment?
Especially when the original investigators claimed they were dealing with profoundly serious, real spiritual threats.
It forces you to balance the fun of the cinematic boogeyman with the very earnest, if controversial, belief system that created it all in the first place. Are we just watching a movie? Or are we, by our very enjoyment, sort of mocking the danger the Warrens believed was still very, very real, locked behind that glass?
A terrifying question to end on as we wait for the last rites of Phase 1.